The first one that we're going to kind of touch on is how to build it, where to start. I would think first you would have, the couple.
It's a pretty good start. I would say that they're always a number one and number two kind of situation.
Yeah, I would think that would be it's the easy win, right?
Sure.
To get you started. It's like making your bed in the morning. You get I know I don't make the bed in the morning. I realized that. And everybody's thinking like, wow, this guy, even though he's obsessed with cake and his kid and football, he's got it together.
Right.
He makes his bed. I don't.
He doesn't.
I don't.
No.
It's a real problem. Actually.
Barely makes his corner.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
That'll be a whole other topic is, okay, now you're married. Now who does the chores? And that's a whole other
one.
Yeah.
You should wait until after you're married before you listen to that podcast.
Yeah. It's scary. So how to build your guest list. So who contributes to that? Who makes up and constitutes the guest list?
So the first thing you kind of want to start with is, well, first off, you want to start with your guest list early on. Let's take a step back here and say that.
I think that's what we said in one of our early episodes.
Yeah.
Is like when you're setting the budget, guest count dictates a lot.
Right. So you're going to probably already have like a rough guest list when you first start out. But I would say most people don't really start to finalize their guest list until they've gotten a little further into planning. And so when you're looking to actually narrow down and lock in final guest list is really what we're going to kind of talk about today. And I would say to start, you really want to kind of break your guest list up. So you want a third of the guest list to be for the couple, a third of the guest list to be for, parent set 1, and a third to be for parent set 2. Now, if there's complicated family dynamics, maybe you have a divorce in the family or step parents or things like that, then that side of the family would still split that third. So they have to kind of, figure out their third together. So that's a good general rule of how the list should break up.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I imagine the politics of that can get a little hairy.
I feel like the politics around guest list always get a little hairy.
Yeah.
So if you set a good rule, a third, a third, a third, which is very fair, very equitable, then the politics are a little less likely to come up because you're not, you've set and I'm going to say this multiple times because I feel like this is how it goes with the guest list. You have to set a rule and you have to stick to it. Don't make an exception, because once you start making exceptions is when people's feelings get hurt.
And when it all breaks down.
So, if you say a third and then maybe the bride's parents are well, we're contributing a little more. Can we get a few extra people? And then you say yes. Well, now all of a sudden the groom's parents are going to, or, other bride's parents are going to be upset because now the other side has more guests than they do. So it's hard, and it's definitely a fine line, especially if one set of parents is contributing more money to the wedding.
Yep.
But I would try to be as equitable as possible and kind of have the conversation up front of saying hey, I really want to be conscious of this. Or if one set of parents is contributing and maybe the other parent who isn't contributing wants to invite more people, say we're on a budget. We have a set amount of money. And so that's why we've set it up this way. And if you set those rules, it'll make life a lot easier throughout the however long you're planning.
So let me throw you a curveball. So what happens if, so that's your rule. 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, right? Okay. So then let's say, hypothetically, the groom's side invites the same number of people as their future spouse's side, and maybe the groom's side has maybe 50% of their guests confirm, whereas the other spouses, it has 80, 90%. So there's going to be an imbalance. How do you address those sort of situations? I would think that would create hurt feelings. And then does the groom side in this scenario get to invite more? How does that work?
Yeah. So, you could do it a couple different ways.
Or is this so not an issue that I'm just making this up?
No, there's all kinds of issues when it comes to guest lists. And it comes a lot to how do you define the line of who is invited and who isn't. And I know we're going to talk about that later. But a couple, you can always consider, doing a B list situation. And maybe when someone from one side declines, then that side gets to send out their next B list. So that's a way to think about it, especially if there's it's a hot topic issue and people want to invite more. That's a good way to do it. If you're going A list, B list route, you have to make sure to send out your invitations super early. So that's something to keep in mind. If it's something you want to do, you need to get ahead of the game and not be behind on sending out your invitations. So it's definitely possible. And I mean, sometimes parents say, okay, well, I really wanted more people. Like, I'm willing to, contribute more to the budget if it means we get to invite people. So then in that case, maybe they contribute more to the budget, and then you add 5 additional invites on each side or something like that. I would still try to keep it equitable, especially like when it comes to money. You don't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable or like, well, I couldn't contribute, and so this person didn't get invited, or, anything. You don't want any weirdness. So you guys are all like becoming a family. So try to keep it as easy and uncomplicated as possible, which is always easier said than done.
Yeah, I was going to say. Okay, so then
Lots of opinions.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of his life, right?
That's life. Yeah, that's married. That's combining families and all kinds of things. Anything where you combine a lot of people, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So who should be a part of your list? So when you're starting to build this out, okay, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Great, we all agree. Who's going to be a part of the list?
So typically on parent side of the list, it's going to be family and any of their friends. So like family friends and things like that. So another place to kind of think about too is if you have like a huge family on one side and a small family on the other side, the 1/3 list might not work out. So that's where you might have to negotiate some of these rules of what your new rules are going to be. Maybe it's all family up to a certain point is invited, and then each family gets 10 friends or something like that. But on your specific list, it's generally going to be your friends, your coworkers, anyone that's friends of the couple. So someone who's not necessarily related to you or friends of your parents is typically what goes on your third of the list.
Okay. No, that makes sense. So what do you do though if one side is bigger than the other? Ours was pretty similar, or at least from family side.
Yeah.
Your side had more family friends than we did, and more in the Northeast where we got married. But how do you handle? Let's say hypothetically you had 8 brothers and sisters, and you had all these aunts and uncles and all this stuff, and you can only have 125 people at your wedding.
Yeah.
Does that mean you don't get to invite any of your friends or your coworkers or any of these other people? How does that work?
It's all a balance. So if you haven't listened to one of our earlier episodes about budget and guest list balancing, go back and listen to that. But quick peek here is that you have your guest list, your budget, and your style. And the 3 kind of have to work intertwinably, and you have to be willing to compromise in some place. So if you have a hard and set budget and you have your style defined and you can only invite 125 people and you have big families, then you're probably going to have to decrease the number of friends. So you just kind of have to look at that, look at your dynamics. If it's super, you guys have relatively small families and there's not, you can have a lot of room for friends, then that makes it a lot easier, of course. But if you have big families, which happens a lot, especially if you have a lot of siblings and maybe your parents have a lot of siblings, now they have a lot of cousins, that can get really crazy. That could be almost 100 people right there. Right. I've seen that happen.
Yeah.
So it definitely becomes more of a conversation. And maybe then in that case, you're kind of saying all aunts and uncles and cousins are invited. And then on top of that, each of those third that we kind of broke up gets, 10 invitations for friends or something like that. And that's where you can set those kind of different rules.
Gotcha. Okay. So this one came up with us when we were getting married. So if I invite one coworker, do I have to invite others?
The long and short of it is no. If you're not going to invite all your coworkers, you need to be really careful about talking about your wedding at work. So I would advise you, if you're not inviting coworkers, to kind of keep that outside of work talk, especially if you're going to invite, maybe you're super close with 1 or 2 of your coworkers.
Yeah.
So definitely kind of don't advertise that you're inviting someone over the other one. Again, it goes back to hurt feelings. And you definitely don't want to make hurt feelings at work, with coworkers and things like that. That can lead to a lot of uncomfortable situations later on down the line.
Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. So let's say I was invited to someone else's wedding. Do I have to invite them?
No, you really don't. I mean, I would think, how close are you guys now? Maybe they got married 5 years ago and you guys don't talk anymore. Right. Or you certainly don't have to invite them.